Welcome, everyone. I'm Carrie Tirado-Brayman, Director of the UB Gender Institute and a professor in the English department here at UB. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the land upon which the University of Buffalo operates, which is the territory of the Seneca Nation, a member of the Haudenosaunee Six Nations Confederacy. Today, this region is still the home to the Haudenosaunee people, and we are grateful for the opportunity to live, work, and share ideas in this territory. This is the final lecture of the UB Gender Institute this academic year, and I want to thank all of our speakers and attendees for making it such a pleasure. I continue to learn a tremendous amount from my colleagues, students, and invited speakers, and it's one of the real benefits of being a part of this institute. We're ending our series on a real high note. Today's speaker is Naila Sahar, a name that may be familiar to many of you. Dr. Sahar received her doctorate from the UB English Department as a Fulbright Scholar in 2018. She worked with professors Corinne Martirosyan, David Schmid, and Deborah Reed Donahue. And the title of her dissertation was Reimagining Muslim Women, Gendered Religious Life and Resistance in the Age of Islamophobia. While she was a graduate student at UB, I had the pleasure of collaborating with her during my first semester as director of the Gender Institute back in 2017. We facilitated a wonderful dorm discussion on South Campus about Malala Yousafzai's autobiography in anticipation of her visit to Buffalo as part of the UB Distinguished Speakers Series. After graduating from UB, Dr. Sahar became an assistant professor at Foreman Christian College in Lahore, Pakistan. This year, she received the highly prestigious AAUW International Postdoctoral Fellowship, and she is spending her fellowship here affiliated with the Department of Global Gender and Sexuality Studies. Her research interests include postcolonial feminism, gendered religious nationalism, and South Asian studies. Her work has appeared in edited volumes with Routledge, South Asian Voices, South Asian Review, and the Journal of Commonwealth and Postcolonial Studies. So it's my pleasure to welcome back Naila Sahar to the Gender Institute. Thank you, Naila. It's all yours.
Thank you so much for such a generous introduction, Carrie. I'm so pleased to be given this opportunity to talk here on this platform. And thank you everybody for joining me here. And today, the way I have broken down the talk would be in some parts. I would kind of rush through the first few slides because they would be underlining all the ideologies on which the digital feminism and activism in South Asia is based. So towards the end, we will try to focus more on what is digital feminism or activism in South Asia, with the focus on Pakistan. So I would now start without delaying it anymore. So we all know how first world feminism and third world feminism both have been at rift with each other. And Western feminism has long been criticized for being too Eurocentric, for reflecting the white middle class concerns of the women who dominate the field. Post-colonial feminism is kind of, it has arisen from the middle of it or from the margins actually. But when we look at the center and margins analogy, then from the margins, if post-colonial feminism has arisen, it has a lot to say about the center as well. So post-colonial feminist theory is primarily concerned with representation of women in once colonized countries and in Western locations. And post-colonial theory, however, many feminists had a lot of reservations about post-colonial theory as well, since they felt that their concerns were least addressed and women were nowhere to be found, even when post-colonial theory made its mark in the history of academia. So post-colonial theory, they felt, was a male-centered field that has not only excluded the concerns of women, but has also exploited them. This was the stance that was adopted by post-colonial feminists. And Edward Said was also a kind of, there were allegations regarding his study Orientalism, and feminists were of the view that very little attention was given to female agency, and very few female writers were discussed. Similarly, Bhabha, a very important theorist regarding post-colonialism, though his work focused on ambivalence of colonial discourses, however, the feminists felt that there was not any reference to how the specifics of gender might complicate this model. So third world feminism actually challenges not only the dominant patriarchal ideologies, but it also contests the local power structures. And it also challenges the racist and Eurocentric views of men and women in the first world. Women's struggles made it clear that while the anti-colonial campaigns were directed against the colonial regime, post-colonial feminism or post-colonial state, as well as the Western interests, they were mainly focused with the neo-colonial status. However, it was least that they were doing about changing any condition for women. The role of women does not end with peace. It was one of the title of an article written by Amina Al-Said about Egyptian women. And the special thing about this title was that it underscored how a woman from these post-colonial states, which were once colonized by the West, when they were freed and they were liberated, women were not liberated. The condition for women remain the same, and their role did not end with peace. So the struggle for them for liberation, for empowerment, it continued. For all feminists, transfer of power at the independence and the achievement of national sovereignty, though desirable, was not the end. It was simply a stage along the way. So usually it is considered that once the nation state is freed, it's liberated, it means the liberation for all genders. However, women did not feel the same. They felt as if they were again made slaves to many things. For instance, there were the discourses regarding honor in the nation state made them further enslaved them. Whereas from a masculine perspective, independence ushered in the defining new condition of post-coloniality. For women, there was no such break. The struggle continued now against a patriarchal sphere that no longer required women's support. So as I have told before in the beginning slides, that the women's, their struggles had to continue, and not only they were defending their rights regarding the Western model of liberation, but they were also fighting against the patriarchy in their own countries. And for them, second liberation struggle began. So what about, I will now dwell on the terms third world and third world woman. Are they those categories which are addressing the concerns of women from all around the third world? So these terms are locus of contention, not only between the first world feminisms and third world women, but also between third world women themselves within the complex field of post-colonial studies. Women from the third world are of the view, or the post-colonial states are of the view, that the claim to authenticity cannot be made. Only a Black can speak for a Black. A post-colonial subcontinental feminist can adequately represent the lived experiences of that culture. And all these dynamics of being diverse in their own struggles, it points to the great difficulty which is posited by authenticity of female racial voices in the great game. Third world feminism takes issues with ways women are often taken to represent the mainstay of cultural identity of the nation. So there are 2 points that we need to remember when we are talking about the third world feminism. Number one, third world feminists cannot be put all of them under the same umbrella, since their struggles are diverse and their struggles are more concerned with their own with the cultural determinism that they are under in their own cultures and countries. Secondly, women are also concerned regarding being enslaved by this framework where women are often taken to represent the mainstay of cultural identity of the nation. For macho nationalists, home and domestic sphere, relatively free from colonial control, was best guardian of the traditional values and culture. So once these states were freed, what happened was these women were not only seen as a symbol of national honor, but they were also seen as symbols of guardian of traditional values. And how this ended was that this kind of further enslaved women in a certain framework where they had to sit at home, they had to be in their chadar and char diwali and save the honor of the nation. And this is exactly where their struggle for liberation also started. Women and modernity came to be regarded as antithetical identities, with the result that the goal of national emancipation involved a betrayal of all prospect of progressive change for women. This was particularly dramatized in India and Africa. The preservation of these practices became celebrated causes of resistance. For instance, if you have read Spivak, you must be knowing how Spivak wrote "The Subaltern Cannot Speak" in the perspective of widow burning instance, where the colonial powers tried to outlaw the practices such as child marriage, widow burning, and female genital mutilation. However, there was a lot of nationalist resistance against this kind of outlawing of such practices, because the people, the indigenous people, the people who were in India, they felt like stopping or outlawing such practices meant there was a certain kind of invasion on their rights of following their culture. So when Spivak says subaltern cannot speak, she is saying that this attempt at outlawing practices such as widow burning were actually attempts of the white men who were trying to save the brown woman from brown men. Excuse me. And of course, women themselves were nowhere to be found in all these instances. So subaltern cannot speak means that subaltern is not given that dialogical level of utterance where they can have a dialogue themselves to the powers or to the people around themselves, and they could say that this is what is happening and this is how we want to change it. So women had least say in whatever was happening, or whether it was outlawing the practices or resistance against that. Women had no voice regarding this. So as a result, women were much more ambivalently placed in relation to both colonialism and anti-colonial nationalism. The striking development of religious nationalisms in the post-colonial era, even now we can see how religion is becoming one of the ways to impose the cultural discourses in India, in Pakistan, even Bangladesh, and Afghanistan, if it can be taken as a territory within South Asia as well. So there is a striking development of religious nationalism, because we have seen that the religious patriarchy has always used religion also as a card to play, where women are seen as repositories of culture and honor. So religious nationalism in the post-colonial era has actually placed women in a situation comparable to that in which they found themselves during colonialism. This is exactly where we say that things actually did not change for women. Nationalism is a gendered process. Now, this is very important to understand. And woman question plays a vital role in the nationalist discourses. Maghdam suggests that we unpack the relationship between nationalism and the images of women and examine the role that woman question has to play in the discourses and programs of revolutionaries. When we talk about woman question and the gendered process through which nationalism undergoes, we mean that all the policies and laws regarding women are the ones that are determining whether a nation is liberated or not. Talk about the education of women, talk about Whale. Woman is always at the center of policy making, and it is through women that it is determined whether a nation is liberated or not. Is it orthodox or not? And we can see that the woman question also became, even now it's becoming one of the ploys and tools to raid the nations in the name of saving that nation from the radical elements. According to Morgan, there is a link between consolidation of power by new states and laws about women. Morgan says that polemics and policies surrounding veiling and unveiling signify that laws and discourses pertaining to gender are central to self-definition of political groups. And this is where exactly we find women being further enslaved, because again, the same question of where is woman speaking on her own behalf? Where is she saying something about herself? And so putting the woman further at the margins, and by doubly marginalizing such women, the laws and discourses pertaining to them are actually becoming the center of the self-definition of political groups and the nationalist processes for the nation states. So one can take the example of Hindu nationalism that has long been identified as imagery of aggressive male warrior, highly central to the idea of contemporary India's Hindutva. So woman has been, even a nation being said that your country is your mother, and discourses like that are very prevalent in South Asia. And these have been constantly regurgitated by images. For instance, the image of Hindu nationalism, in which the imagery of aggressive male is used. Today, when women have negotiated their way through the cultural dominant ideas of masculinity and femininity, that both are powerful and visible. So this aggressive male is always seen as trying to save the mother India. Moreover, motherland or nation as a woman to be protected by brave citizen warriors is a common metaphor for nationalisms. So this kind of imagery of woman as a symbol of nation, or as nation's honor, this has further proved to be even more complex for women liberation or for women's rights. Nation as a woman also intersects the nationalist discourses through socially constructed ideas of honor. In many contexts, women symbolize national honor. Thus, any act that defiles or violates women's bodies becomes a political weapon aimed at destroying the enemy nation's honor. And this is exactly why we see whenever there are wars, there are statistics regarding how many women were raped, how many women were mutilated. And through these statistics, it is tried to gauge how much harm has been done to a certain enemy. So it has always been on women's bodies that we are fighting the honor of nations. Young boys and men since the beginning of RSS, again, we are talking about Hindu warriors. Then an example from Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, the image of Sita, of Indian womanhood, has been seen parallel to the image of Vihara Mahadevi, a historical figure projected as significant model of Sri Lankan womanhood, used to depict a model of perfect daughter and devoted wife, and courageous and patriotic mother. Moreover, even in the case of Sri Lanka, Alves describes women warriors. Even when women are shown as warriors, they cannot be. It is seen as against the perfect ideology regarding the gendered ideology if they are masculinized. So it is seen that women warriors for the liberation of Tamil nation with the liberation tigers of Tamil Elam as masculinized virgin warriors. Which had to portray women's internal body as pure, chaste, virginal, while her outer body is marked as masculine. So even if she's as much as masculine that she can have the weapons in her hand, but she has to be, the image has to also surround regarding her purity and just chastity and virginity, that she is still, as much feminine as any other woman. She cannot be reduced to a symbol of being a masculine power. While its women, cadres challenge the previously prescribed gender positions through their combat roles, are also expected to preserve national tradition. Bangladesh is unique in South Asia. Since almost 3 decades, Bangladeshi politics have been dominated by 2 women. However, Haldar argues that presence of women political leadership at the national level in Bangladesh signifies the absence of women-friendly nature of polity. For example, women leaders in Awami League and Bangladesh Nationalist Party reflect the dominance of patriarchal ideologies, their association with political brands, political martyrdom, and political culture and ideology advantages of their social class. These show the advantages of their social class rather than the issue of gender equity within the political system. So even where in South Asia you see women being empowered, they being in the power, we can see things kind of never change. And similar was the case even in Pakistan during the Benazir Bhutto's era, when she was in power, but things regarding women did not change much. And she was eventually ousted on the allegations of corruption, which were majorly filed against her husband. So she kind of suffered through the same framework. Considering above all examples, we can see how nationalism has remained gendered process. Gender activism and nationalism in South Asia has been marked by religious discourses and cultural baggage. As a result, South Asian women end up existing in a double bind. So the argument that I make here is that although women were freed, but they were not free. And this ideology, this theory of double bind, I have taken it from Spivak. And Spivak says that being in a double bind is a position where you end up existing in a situation where burden of decision making becomes burden of responsibility as well, the burden of responsibility for the whole nation's honor and shame. And this is the kind of subject position in which women in South Asia usually find themselves, the situation where they're in a double bind. In her essay, Spivak refers to the double bind as shuttling between two subject positions. Her theory of double bind becomes, she says that the double bind becomes that existential crisis for women where despite all efforts of liberation, South Asian woman constantly finds herself struggling with the expectations and stereotypes of what it is to be a traditional modern woman. So although nationalists would say women have the rights now, they're in their own country, they're liberated, but the stereotypes that are attached with them, the stereotypes of preserving the national honor, preserving the traditions, preserving their own honor, the expectations of shame, all these expectations and stereotypes are again imprisoning these women in a certain framework, which is the kind of opposite of what we call liberation. Digital feminism, now I'm coming finally towards digital feminism. And we need to understand that all these things that were discussed above, they actually, the digital feminism in South Asia is stemming from all the above ideologies, perceptions, and cultural determinism. And that is why it was very important to discuss what is the role of nationalism, what is the role of post-colonial nation states in determining where the women stand, and especially the question of the woman question, where the woman question becomes the basis of all policy making and all the laws that determine the stance of a certain nation, and even their own position regarding being liberal or secular or modern or radical Islamist or whatever. So woman question is at the center of all the questions regarding nations' liberty and freedom. And this has been exploited through and through, right from the beginning of time till now in all the South Asian nations. South Asian digital feminism comprises of women struggling to resist contestations over the control and regulation of women's bodies and their use as markers of nation. South Asian feminism are both complex categories, not amenable to easy definition. Post-colonial South Asia, which today, so what are the states that we consider as included under this category of post-colonial South Asia? These are the nation states of Bangladesh, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and most recently Afghanistan is continuously overshadowed by regionalism, geopolitics, and ethnic strife, making it difficult to speak of it as a singular nation. So though we say that this is the area which includes the post-colonial South Asia, but we cannot say the struggles are the same. They're almost the same, but the way to tackle with the concerns which are indigenous to every region, that makes the struggles of women different, but kind of same. There are intersections, but there is diversity towards this resistance dynamic as well. For the lives and identities of women of the region, there is more that unites than separates. It has been well documented that the woman's question comes to be central to nation-making process in the British South Asia. Through the use of technology as a powerful tool of resistance, we all know how much the digital is important in our lives. All day long, we are on social media, we are looking at the views and issues that are going on around the world through the lens of social media. And this platform has been very effectively used by South Asian women as a tool of resistance and activism. So women and persons of other marginalized genders in South Asia continue to help contemporary feminism evolve into a more inclusive, multidimensional, and pro-intersectional movement. Internet has proved to be instrumental for some women's examination, critique, transgression, and subversion of the interpretable gendered socio-political and cultural scripts. The power of hashtag, we all know what has happened with the advent of the movement, which we call Me Too. A remarkable example is Me Too. However, when we talk about the Me Too movement in South Asia, we need to remember that sex is still an unspoken and taboo subject for most of the South Asian households, and it's considered that refusal to discuss sexuality is to protect and barricade the family. Now, in the few slides that are coming ahead now, what I'm going to try to explain what is happening regarding the digital feminism in South Asia through a few case studies. Kanksha Rena writes in an article, Me Too, Why Is It Hard for Men to Believe Women and Their Stories? She writes, my upper caste, middle class, complicit family had never found itself in this place before. A conversation with my uncle at the dinner table stirred to the Me Too movement that had now bled out of the realm of the internet and percolated into the primetime television. As more famous men and household names were being outed, the murmuring has only gotten louder. When the accusations against Anu Malik resulted in him stepping down as the judge of popular reality show, my parents were shocked. He is also out. Me too, my father exclaimed. His me too sounded like a disease that had claimed yet another life. My uncle asked me, the feminist of the house, for my opinion on Me Too movement. On expressing it, he started with, how is it possible that so many men are capable of bad things, and that it was unfair for women to come out decades after the incident, that some women were falsely accusing powerful men of attention, and that men's reputations were being damaged. None of these statements surprised me. But what riled me up was when he said, at this rate, I'll think twice before hiring a woman in my team. Who knows what she'll do? This example shows how the intersection of gendered understandings with technological fluidity creates spaces where individuals can be simultaneously empowered and subjugated. So speaking out has not only empowered women, speaking out has also kind of subjugated them and has put women in the position where there is further regression written for them within a systemic system which creates places of oppression for them. The proliferation of digital technologies, virtual spaces, and new forms of engagement raise key questions about changing nature of relationships and identities within democratic societies. Scholars and policymakers, activists have only begun to understand how everyday life is being transformed by technology. Women began documenting their act of loitering. So Me Too movement was one of the instances that I wanted to discuss. Another hashtag which is very important in South Asia, which started from India, is Why Loiter, in which women were actually documenting their act of loitering. There is a very sharp division of spaces, gendered spaces in South Asia, where public spaces are basically claimed or reclaimed by men, and women are seen as belonging only to the harem, to the inner spaces. Although things are changing, but still the act of loitering is something of a transgression, seen as a transgression for women from South Asia. And now women have started reclaiming these areas, these public spaces. So Why Loiter became a very important hashtag. The lived experience of most of women in India, like other women in South Asia, is that of being made to feel unwelcome in public spaces. While Loiter is based on the ideas articulated by Shilpa Patke, a feminist academic based in Mumbai. While Loiter is invested in altering the relationship of women to the cities they live in, women's right to play or in experiencing, exploring, wandering the city on their own terms. While Loiter served as an inspiration for a group of young women in Pakistan to start a Tumblr blog, which was called, again, hashtag Girls at Dhabas. Dhabas are these small places where people sit outside on the sides of the roads. They sit, they gossip, they can keep on sitting for a long time. Traditionally, these places like dhabas are seen as only belonging to men. However, women have now reclaimed these spaces. So this hashtag Girls at Dhabas became one of the very important hashtags for women in Pakistan, where they started reclaiming these public spaces on their own terms, who started to document instances of women frequenting roadside tea stalls and cafes, which are usually overwhelming male spaces. You can see some of the pictures, women sitting on the street sides, enjoying themselves, having food. So Spivak, in her essay, Can the Subaltern Speak?, problematizes the issue of rendering subaltern visible or lending her voice. According to Spivak, subaltern is a person who is removed from all lines of social mobility. Subaltern is barred from access to all public resources that would allow for upward movement. Borrowing the term subaltern from Spivak, Radhika Gajala, in her more recent work titled Cyber Culture and Subaltern, attempts to map how voice and silence shape online space in relation to online actualities. Reading through this nuanced reading, Gajala attempts to redefine what subaltern might mean when the current condition that allows users to inhabit online networks is also simultaneously networked into the process of globalization. Gajala and her colleagues define the subaltern body in the context of digital as one that is invisible, existing simultaneously with hyper visibility of particular images and the constructs of subaltern. So one of the things that this digital space has done is also regurgitating or kind of reinforcing the similar type of tropes and the similar type of hyper visibility for some classes, yet not for the other. And this is exactly where the constructs of subaltern are important. Seen in this context, technology is increasingly used by South Asian women subalterns to visually represent and make visible the female body and the traumas enacted on it. Considering the case of Bangladesh, women in Bangladesh claim Me Too movement on Facebook, motivated by Me Too. A number of Bangladeshi women also introduced a woman-only Facebook group titled Nari, Mohila Bus Service Limited, translated in English as Woman, Ladies Bus Service. This is a poster of this movement. According to Gajala, technological environments are social environments shaped around the use of any type of technology. Such social environments are place-based, and their structuring is shaped by local histories, geographical conditions, and everyday cultural practices. And this is exactly where we see that, how we can understand the particular struggles of women are also diverse struggles when we put them in this framework of local histories and geographical conditions and everyday cultural practices from which women go through and within which women coexist. We must ask how we theorize the influence of diverse virtual voices at the intersection of gender and injustice. In this regard, it is important to ask digital technologies and spaces are how digital technologies and spaces are inculcating dynamics of equality or impartiality. Gajala writes that when we speak of women-centered environments, there is an implicit assumption that they will be wonderful conflict-less spaces. However, this assumption needs to be countered by questioning how unsaid conditions for erasure of conflict and creation of consensus is equal to erasure of dissenting voices, and how the performances of lack of hierarchy are actually based on silences of many other. For instance, we have seen many times Facebook is kind of, banning people, blocking certain discourses or certain activists. So are these technological spaces all about giving spaces to the diverse voices, or are there some silences that are imposed as well included in such dynamics? How do we work these contradictions as we try to build a dialogical technological environment, offline or online? Therefore, we should assume that designing women-centered technological environments under currently circulating definition of what women-centered seems to imply is empowering to all marginalized women of the world. With this pandemic, with COVID-19 hitting the whole world, digital feminism has reached another kind of pinnacle. And I will now discuss digital feminism in Pakistan during COVID-19 to consider these dynamics of equality and impartiality, building dialogic technological environment. We can look into Pakistan's gender divide, digital gender divide, and those who are doubly marginalized amidst COVID-19 as a case study, which might help examining how voice and silence shape online space in relation to offline actuality. Study Women Disconnected, Feminist Case Studies on the Gender Digital Divide amongst COVID-19. This study was, it took place in 2021, and it talks about how gender divide is also affected by region in which women are residing. Significant majority of respondents said that internet is expensive for them to varying degrees. 6 in 1 respondents said that they face some sort of restrictions when using internet. During lockdown specifically, women who were using internet inside of their homes, it was impossible for them to go out of their homes since there were lockdowns. They couldn't go to the educational institutions. So these kind of lockdowns also restricted the mobility and further barred the access to internet. So for women, most of the times it was a problem to travel to great distances to connect through internet, while cultural barriers, including the belief that internet is unsafe or that the use may expose women to outsiders, continues to create hurdles in women's use of technology. It appears that affordability, lack of access to devices and connectivity, and domestic responsibilities at home that leave women with no time with their own are as big hurdles for women in Pakistan. Also, there were concerns about not becoming the subject of male gaze. There is also a big taboo attached with the spaces, the technological spaces, which see internet as a model where women are further getting exposed to the male gaze. So women felt surveilled online, and they observed a kind of digital parda as well. And this becomes one of the additional problems here. While technology enables various women who are not allowed to step out of home for work, and often flexibility, low cost of digital labor continues to pose the challenge as well. There have been increased attacks of gender-based violence against women and gender. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Yes, we can.
Yeah, I saw the message that I was muted. All right.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I muted someone in the audience. Sorry.
There have been increased attacks of gender-based violence against women and gender sexual minorities that force them off these platforms. So the restrictions on offline mobility also further increase the restrictions regarding online mobility for these women. In addition to this, infrastructural, geographical, economic, and social barriers in accessing the internet add to the challenges that make up for the gender divide, gender digital divide in Pakistan. Implicit investigation and conversations about South Asian gender digital divide are questions about so-called subaltern labor, affect, and political economy, what technologies of power, literacy, and culture play into the internets that weave online and offline. When is the subaltern brought online, and for what purpose is also one of the questions that we need to think about. For the subaltern to access capital, or for the capital to access the subaltern. What layers of cultural and material capital allow this naming, and what layers of disadvantage permit it to be framed, disciplined, so the subaltern voice is not heard, but reinterpreted in elsewhere that the subaltern has no claim to. And this is the moment where I would like to introduce you to the Aurat March in Pakistan, which started in 2017. And this has been one of the most talked about grassroots movements that started in Pakistan. And there has been a lot of talk about how Aurat March, which means Women's March, it has been hijacked by the elite, and there haven't been the accusations of silencing the offline actualities through the online resistance as well. Giving the name of this movement, Aurat March, is an attempt at drawing the dynamics of intersectional feminist politics. There were slogans used in this march which were indigenized. These were slogans such as "Ghar ka kaam, sabka kaam," housework is everyone's job, "Khud khana garam karo," heat up your own food, "Consent ki tasbih roz padhe," read the rules of consent daily, and one of my favorites, "Paratha roles, not gender roles." So yeah, these gave a local flavor to all these slogans. And the important thing about this Aurat March is that, and there were a lot of revolutionary acts, for instance, women holding a funeral during these marches, like the symbolic funerals. And in religion, Islam, women are not allowed to be present in the funeral prayers. So this was kind of challenging the patriarchal culture and the religious orthodoxy by the woman. How this Aurat March is connected to the digital spaces is the way the information is disseminated about this march. Organizers have the Facebook and Instagram pages, Twitter pages. There's a euphoria about this new form of protest. And there, it is said that this is one of the very important resistance strategies, one of the most important ones after Ziaul Haq's repressive Hudud ordinance laws, where women had protested a lot during 1980s. Now, again, we can see that kind of dynamic during the Aurat March as well. And there have been very diverse views about Aurat March in Pakistan on Reddit. There are a few comments, if you can read them. It's pretty iconic. People say it's pretty iconic that the ultra elites holding placards on Aurat March are the ones who treat masis and knockers, their servants, like and are least oppressed in the society. So it is seen as, that Aurat March is only led by the elite women who have this ability to be mobile, to go outside homes. Otherwise, most of the women in the suburban areas or in the cities which are not the metropolitans, they're not allowed to go out of their homes even. So there were questions regarding the authenticity of this digital space as well, this revolutionary act of marching as well. You can see some of the art that is disseminated on media about this march. Shazil Malik is the artist here. And you can see the euphoria in pictures. And Aurat March women, the organizers claim that this is not only about women only. It's actually, we are aiming for much more. We are demanding incremental institutional changes, such as addition of women and trans women to medical legal officers, criminalizing the two-finger test, and questions related to sexual history and conducted during the rape investigations. Their campaign, they say, highlights some of the specific tools that are used to perpetuate patriarchal violence. I wanted to show you this song, the very famous Chilean anti-rape anthem, which became global anthem for a borderless revolution. It is used by these Pakistani women revolutionaries as well. I don't know if I can play it. I don't know if I have the time to do that, but maybe just a minute or so. All right. So the role of artists in Art March has also been very important. You can again see some of the images here. So why has Aurat March become problematic? To frame the challenges regarding representation of subaltern during Aurat March, we may go back to the question that Gajala raises. What layers of cultural and material capital allow this naming, and what layers of disadvantage permitted to be framed, disciplined, so that the subaltern voice is not heard, but reinterpreted in and elsewhere where the subaltern has no claim to, that the subaltern has no claim to. Although Aurat March in Pakistan has raised many pertinent issues regarding women oppression, however, there are accusations regarding these being the problems of elites only. There are women who already have access to public spaces, they say. Protesters in Aurat March have also been accused of clashing with religious narratives which regard men as guardian of women, whereas women are expected to be submissive to men. In a country where shalwar kameez and dupatta are culturally accepted ways of dressing up for women, challenging dupatta has been seen as a gross example of elite privilege here. So how does the question of accessibility then problematizes the issues of representation? Can women from bigger city enjoy better resources than their sisters living in rural areas that they claim to represent all women? So again, the question of authenticity has been a major question regarding women's voices in Aurat March as well. As we observed in Sabah Mahmood's theorizing of women of Egyptian mosque movement, some women follow religion solely for the aims of self-realization and not as submission to patriarchal norms. So such considerations make the question of women's march even more complex, Also, there is another very important digital resource for women in Pakistan on the Facebook group, which is named as Soul Sisters, which is one of the groups where women share their problems, keeping themselves anonymous. And the topics that are discussed on this platform range from the issues of sexual harassment to the problems that Pakistani women face while living with their in-laws, which includes issues of financial stabilities and how to deal with being homebound. There are several rape cases that are discussed. Conversations with Kamal has been one of the platforms as well. Then the Me Too movement in Pakistan. Misha Shafi she's one of the mainstream singers, pop singers in Pakistan, who initiated and started this Me Too debate in Pakistan, where she accused a fellow male pop star. However, there was a lot of people lashed at Misha Shafi that she actually invited it all because she herself is a pop singer. She dressed in this way, and all those discourses regarding, again, confusing the victim with the one who is inviting that whole being the one who invites certain situations in themselves. And these are the pictures of Misha Shafi, and this is the singer that she accused of harassment. So internet then turned against Misha. However, Misha Shafi kept her ground, and she was like, colleagues, friends who didn't do so much as check up on me during the past month with a simple "you okay," let alone support, believe me, sending me petitions to sign against slow clap for you. Shafi posted another tweet saying, "Woman, he harassed me repeatedly, made me feel violated, humiliated, unsafe. Other women, me too, me too, me too. Defender, foreign funding, foreign agenda, get a life." So Me Too in Pakistan also took a sharp turn last year when the girls of an elite school started coming out, accusing their administration of sexual harassment. There was a whole movement. There were pages and pages filled of different little girls accusing their administration that sided with their harassers. Mainstream media's insensitive sensationalization of the issue also became one of the issues that was raised during this. This is what patriarchal society tells a woman, that anything that happens to her is her fault, said the rights activist and lawyer Likat Tad. And mind you, all this is happening actually on the social media, on Twitter, on Facebook. So Me Too movement had a lot of traction on these digital spaces. Also, our previous prime minister, he kept on adding to these discourses regarding rape and victimization and harassment when he linked one incident of rape to obscenity, and he asked women to to be more conservative regarding their dresses. And he said that this was happening because women did not know how to probably dress up, and they were he implied that women were actually inviting it all. And then they demanded an immediate apology. However, this was unbelievable that the head of the state himself was indulging in a victim blaming. And this was covered all over the media, even in the international media covered it. You can see Al Jazeera covered it by saying he advised women to cover up to prevent temptation. This entire concept of parda is to avoid temptation. Not everyone has the willpower to avoid it, he said, using the term that he can refer to the modest stress of segregation of sexes. Fault rests solely with the rapist and the system, the woman activist said. So again, here we see the double bind starts to kick in. Double bind becomes the existential crisis for women in South Asia, where despite all the efforts to liberation, South Asian women constantly find themselves struggling with expectations and stereotypes of what it is to be a South Asian woman. In South Asian context, a good woman is the one who keeps herself confined within chadar and chardivari, which is a veil and the confines of four walls. In Pakistani context, the double bind imprisons women simultaneously in the Eurocentric discourse of being oppressed woman and in the patriarchal and religious discourses at home for being brash and unashamed libertines and not being enough Muslims. Despite dynamics of progress in women reclaiming digital spaces in South Asia, we have to consider how these digital spaces could be accessible to many. Empowerment for women within the technological environments would mean that they would have better access to power structures and hierarchies that shape and control such environments. They would in fact have the power to shape these environments in such a way so as to make them inviting to diverse populations. No matter how much advanced internet gets, as Spivak puts it, subaltern cannot speak because not only subaltern is structurally subordinated, but also because subaltern is a person who is removed from all lines of social mobility and is barred from access to all public resources. In Can a Subaltern Speak? Can the Subaltern Speak? Spivak makes it clear that one cannot simply make the subaltern visible or lend her a voice because there is no quick fix for inequality. Digital dilemmas for women in South Asia will stay the same unless there is an infrastructural follow-up, which manifests a community's commitment to improving the material conditions for faraway lives, honing their skills of engaging through digital spaces. As Ghazala puts it, euphoria about new media and internet connectivity is concealing the crucial political and economic shifts that are enabled by the ways in which digital technologies have become key players in the process of globalization. Questions to ponder on will be, how do we theorize the influence of diverse virtual voices at the intersection of gender and injustice? How can innovative methodologies enable new insights into the social transformations of gender relations, digital cultures, and social justice? How is digital technology shaping relationships between diverse publics, citizen communities, activists, policymakers in terms of transforming gender injustice? Will women in South Asia be able or allowed to use new technologies under the conditions that are contextually empowering to them because they are defined by women themselves? Within what internet-based context can women from the South Asia truly be heard? How can they define the conditions under which they can interact online to enable them to form transnational collaborations and coalitions aiming to transform social, cultural, and political structures? And that is all from my side. Thank you for listening.
Wow, thank you so much, Naila. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
So much material. I want to just remind everyone that we are recording this and we will post it in the next. I want to invite questions, comments. You can pose a question in the box. You can unmic yourself. You can raise your hand so we can see you. And I'll be happy to moderate our conversation. To get us started, Naila, I was wondering if it was fascinating on so many different levels to see how Spivak's essay is still so relevant today in the digital age. But also I wanted to address the middle classness and the eliteness of the Me Too movement in Pakistan and other parts of South Asia. And I want to, is that a bad thing? I'm just remembering, Naila, I was hoping you can comment. because I'm thinking about important movements that have been middle class, and I'm thinking of the women's suffrage movement here in the United States. I'm thinking of the anti-nuclear movement in Britain in the 1980s, and it was absolutely middle class and upper middle class. Why is that a bad thing necessarily? I mean, I'm wondering, to what extent is it discounted simply because of the class nature? And I guess I'm pragmatic. And I was hoping you could address that, because I think it's a way to criticize it in some way.
Right. So when talking regarding South Asia, the religious radicalism is actually on increase in South Asia. And when we talk about radical religious discourses, they inscribe women in a certain framework where the outer world or the public spaces are kind of a complete no-no for women, a no-go area for women. And this is basically the reason why whenever there is a pushback, or whenever there are women reclaiming the public spaces, reclamation of their rights, there is always a pushback, further pushback from the patriarchal forces. And this has been also quite unfortunate in the context of South Asia as well, that whenever there are grassroots movements, they have been seen as being hijacked by the Western powers somehow. Especially the NGOs are seen as the enemies of the culture and the traditional discourses in Pakistan, and maybe in other South Asian countries as well. So when posed in comparison to these religious discourses, the question of women liberation has always been seen as a question where women would rather, their concerns regarding liberation are seen as their desire to be free from these cultures and traditions, and to modernize themselves, to be westernized. So modernity or liberation is equal to actually a desire to be more Western for most of the patriarchal powers or forces back in these countries. And the backlash is because of that. Most of the women who are going out of their homes, demanding rights for themselves, are seen as, as those who are rejecting culture, those who are rejecting traditions. And as I have said in my slides as well, most of the times, as women are seen as repositories of culture and tradition and home and values and honor and parda and wailing, anything that says, or anybody who raises any voices regarding women, is seen as antithetical to these questions of honor and traditions and values.
Very good. So then the discourse is so constrained, isn't it? So where do the feminists go to claim a space that isn't just defeated as, or just dismissed as colonialist or westernized?
Feminists back in these countries are constantly seeing themselves, as I said, this double mind where they want to talk, yet whenever they talk, they are reduced to the simple binary of being Eastern or Western, or being traditional or liberated, and even the term liberal is seen as a curse word for women. So they are trying their best. There are many new platforms that are digitally constructed. One of them I talked about was Soul Sisters, which has been started by Kamal. However, Kamal is constantly telling how she has received so many threats, and how she has been constantly receiving, she's in danger, her life is in danger. She now lives somewhere in Canada. She has left the country. But the very unfortunate thing is that whenever a woman is talking about such issues, she is directly seen as a Western or foreign agenda holder. And this eventually leads to, her being silenced as well. But now things are gradually changing. I don't have many hopes, but there are many, many women who are actually coming out of this binary, and they are reclaiming their voices and they are saying what they wanted to say. But the very interesting thing is that even in these groups, when women are raising their voices, it is under anonymity. It is as an anonymous post. This is what happened, for instance, they're like, okay, I don't want to name it. I don't want my name to be visible to anyone. Please post it as anonymously, because they do not want to be exposed as, someone who is challenging any kind of family structure or tradition. So yes, although things are changing, but we are still in this stage of development where I do see some light, but things are changing very slowly. Especially with regards to Aurat March, things have changed a lot. But the concerns regarding the elitist discourses, where we see women, coming on streets, this has majorly happened in 3 major cities, that is Lahore, Islamabad, and Karachi. There have been some cities which are not metropolitan, such as Hyderabad and Faisalabad, and there are some cities that are like starting these movements, and women march on the Women's Day as well in these cities. But since the women from very elite institutions are coming out and they have the liberty to march on roads, these grassroots movements are also seen as being hijacked by the Western agendas.
Okay, thank you. I think we have some questions from the floor now. Mamouna, did you want to unmute yourself and ask the first question, and then Aisha, then you'll go next.
Okay, thank you very much. Me a chance to speak out. First, so far as this information was concerned, I found it very beneficial. And Ma'am Naila, she has shown the meticulous observation. She has explored the worldwide scenario regarding the effort made by women. I really encourage that, and hats off to her. That Zoom meeting turned out to be very informative for all of us. But my question to the prestigious lady is that, see, she has given us a thorough, complete and exhaustive picture that from time to time, women have been struggling hard as a reactionary against their double marginalization. But still, in every third world country, no matter it's India, Pakistan, everywhere, women are still victimized, they're still exploited. And the voices which come out and which turn out to be reactionary, they are from elite class. They do not depict the common lady to full extent. I think there can be a complete change. There would be a radical change if ladies from middle class and from lower strata come out and voice out their protest against this male patriarchy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I completely agree, Mamouna. And I feel like, just as I said during my talk as well, things are gradually changing, and especially when I am a frequent visitor to this group, which is Soul Sisters, and the way concerns are highlighted there, it makes me very optimistic about this scenario, that people are eventually speaking. And it's a kind of sisterhood where it's an all women's group, and girls are writing, women are writing there.
Sure.
So you can see, even during this talk, you can see the pushback here,
Yes, absolutely, which shows you how important your work is.
Yeah, and it's difficult to talk about women. You can see even in this platform, how much intimidation, you get intimidated talking about these issues. And back in Pakistan, when I lived there and I kept on talking about these issues, I was invited by different institutes. I went there for talks. It hasn't been an easy journey. So yeah, in this kind of scenario, directly it goes with what is happening in our countries as well. That whenever you are talking about these issues, there is a constant harassment attached to it. There is a constant, patriarchal intervention is involved there. So what we can do about it is just keep talking, just keep struggling, just keep pushing through, and just asserting that our voices do matter. And middle class is saying a lot now. They are talking. A woman from the middle class, although I said, just as I said before, they would like to talk in anonymity, but they do talk now. So yes, I mean, like I would see there is hope, Memuna. I hope so. It's only hope that we have.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Aisha, you're Mamuna. Okay, Aisha, you're next.
Hi, thank you, Naila. That was fantastic. My question, like kind of a two-parter question, but also not really a question. First, like there's always been pushback for whenever women have tried to, assert themselves, even back in the 19th century and the advent of the 20th century when the suffrage movement was happening. There was lots of like political cartoons of like women being these monsters who are oppressing men because they want to go out and vote. So like even in Western newspapers and such, this was a huge thing. So unfortunately, there are many times where things like the more things change, the more they stay the same kind of situation. But at the same time, like it's also interesting to note that in South Asia, like you mentioned, there have been more female representation in the higher offices. Like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh have had female prime ministers, which you would think that would be surprising, but like I think it's also important to acknowledge that all these prime ministers came from dynastic families. So they had the dynastic support behind them, like Benazir Bhutto, the Bhutto clan, Hasina Wajid, huge political dynastic family, Indira Gandhi, self-explanatory. I mean, so in that regard, I think it's also more difficult for women of the middle classes and lower classes to speak out, because it is women of these upper crusty situations who uphold the patriarchal system.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that, like, how do we push back against that? Like, because it's women working against women so many times. So like, how do we navigate that? Like, it's literally a maze. Like, how do you do that?
Right. Thank you for this question, Aisha. I feel there are two things that need to be addressed here. Number one, how women become themselves the tool to patriarchy. Number two, how these women sometimes themselves do not want to push back and they do not want to take up the wars. And I feel like Benazir Bhutto is also one of the very important case studies regarding this. When she became a tool to corruption regarding her husband, and it was mainly because of him and lots of other things that she lost her position in the end. And yes, many females themselves are upholding patriarchy themselves as well. And we can see a lot of cases where it's very difficult for them to get out of that framework. And I think that is also where hierarchy matters. When these few women see themselves surrounded by all these men who uphold a certain kind of discourse, it's very hard for them to get out of that mode, and to even for them, the irony is to entrench in their positions, to keep themselves in these positions of power. It becomes indispensable for them to not challenge the patriarchy and become a part of it instead. So I really don't have a solution to it. But yes, the systems of patriarchy are very powerful in these countries, in our countries. And to challenge them would take a lot of effort, and maybe time could change things. I really don't know. As I said, we do not have a quick fix to anything. It's a systemic oppression women constantly go under. And maybe with time, things will change. With time, the structures will have to be changed. More women representation would probably make a few changes in this dynamic.
Thank you, Aisha, for your question. Our next question is from Faika Rashid. You can unmute yourself if you'd like.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much, Dr. Naila. It was a wonderful talk, and it has various dimensions, and it has raised a few questions at the same time. My first question is that, like you have mentioned, some of the activism, digital activism, and we have learned about some hashtags, Me Too, and these kind of efforts. I just wonder that whenever we talk about feminism and the struggle of the women, we do not find narratives about the achievements of the women. And I'm referring to the women who live in Pakistan who are not from the elite class. They are like Samina Beg, the mountaineer who went to the top of the highest mountain. I'm talking about Nasreen, the athlete. I'm talking about a girl. I even am not able to recall her name. She is the first female polo player of Pakistan. There are many other names, but I wonder that we do not have narratives which celebrate their achievements. So if you know any of the digital activism which is celebrating their achievements, that would be another addition in the work, because we have been talking so much about the struggle of the women, the suppression of the women, and all that. So this is the first thing that I would like to discuss. The second question is that do we talk about the traditional role of patriarchy? But in the modern time, in the contemporary age, I am at least familiar with the type of patriarchy which is supportive to the women to some extent, especially all those men who belong to our class. They've been supportive to the education of the women. Some of them even belong to the suburbs and the rural areas. I know there is a very less percentage of that. But what to talk about those people? I do not know whether to label them as patriarchy or not, but they have a very positive image. They were there somewhere at the back of the support. They were not the known people. They were our male members of the family, but they were also, supportive and progressive in their approach. So do comment on these kind of efforts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Faika. So you have two concerns here. Number one, why the women from the middle classes who are breaking stereotypes, they're not talked much about. I feel you and me know about them because we have read certainly something at least about them. Also, I feel it's your and my responsibility as maybe feminists or just women who are backing other women to talk about these women. You and me and all of us women, we have the platform, the digital platform, and we can use it the way we want. So if nobody else is talking about them, maybe we can start talking about them, and we can, give them the space that they actually deserve. Secondly, you said that the type of patriarchy that is supportive to women. I would like to point out here that patriarchy is not a word used for men only. Patriarchy is a state of mind. Patriarchy is a certain thinking where it is felt that the woman's place is this and this specific arena, and women are they need to remain in these limits, and they cannot go out of this certain limitation which has been regarded as their only place of action by a certain people. And patriarchy does not only mean men. Patriarchy is a state of mind which is held by women as well. So woman is also the part of that patriarchy. So instead of using the word patriarchy, we might say that, yes, there are certain men who are feminists as well. Yes, there are certain men who are supporting women. So this patriarchal mindset is challenged by both men and women who are feminists. I have said this so many times during teaching as well, that mainly in South Asia, we consider that feminist is only a woman. Feminist is anyone who's supporting women, and patriarchy is considered as only men. No, patriarchy does not mean that it's something regarding a man as well, only a man, or being or saying that certain person is a misogynist. It does not mean that that feminists are men haters. Feminists are just those people, not only women, who are supporting other women. They can be our fathers, they can be our brothers, they can be husbands, they can be your partners. And yes, there are a lot of the patriarchal mindset is what is held by many women as well. Their mother-in-laws, their sisters, who would like you to work in a certain framework, or to keep at home and to just look after kids, or do not follow your dreams. So yes, you are right. There are lots of men who are supporting women now, and this is a positive change that we can see in our societies as well. And gradually, I feel like things might change. However, we need to consider that patriarchy is a mindset that needs to be challenged by all feminists, whether they are men or women. So I hope I answered.
Important answer. The next question comes from Samira Abbas, and then Maria Amir will follow.
Thank you so much, Naila, for this beautiful talk. It was very thought-provoking, and at the same time provocative for some, as we saw. So that was very interesting. We find it funny. I have a kind of, I would say I have two questions from the discussion that we've been having. So you talked about how digital activism usually arises within the elite class, but we also noticed that on Twitter, for example, or on Facebook, most of the activism is also from people who have settled abroad already, or if it's an activist in Pakistan, they are mostly forced to seek asylum outside the country at the end. Do you think this constant import of activists from the country to the West most of the times is going to bring any change, which would have probably been more possible if the resistance stayed on the ground? Another thing is, if there are voices from the middle class, usually we see that these voices have to be framed within the tradition, or they have to be framed within the Islamic contours. How much do you think that that framing actually enables a movement towards liberation, or is it restricting in itself as well?
Thank you, Samira. Thank you for this question. And this whole thing that you said is very enriched in its concerns. First, you said that there are a lot of people who are speaking from other countries, and would their voices be as authentic or not? So there is this question of authenticity, which has constantly been posed by the feminists from South Asia as well. However, I feel that whenever a woman is crossing a border, she is seen as a person who is talking on behalf of the foreign powers. However, there are pros and cons of crossing borders. The pros would be that this kind of space, a third space, for instance, me coming in another country and now talking about women, would certainly kind of bar me from the impact which might be on me when I'm talking from my own country, where I'm directly accessible to any harm, to any forces that would like to harm us. So not only it is giving us the third space, it is giving us a hybrid space where we are in the position to compare and contrast ourselves, and having this liberty of talking, about our concerns in a more kind of daring way. So this third space can be utilized as a very productive space. However, as I discussed in the talk as well, whenever women are speaking about their concerns, that it is always in our country seen as a challenge to the traditional frameworks of household, of honor, where men feel that women are transgressing. So yeah, it goes both ways. When you are crossing borders, you do have the liberty to address the issues, but then you are also in the danger of being seen from the same framework, where though you are an indigenous talking from this experience, you are seen as a foreigner. So, and yes, this is what we say, that this is where the grassroots feminism or grassroots activism matters a lot. But even in the instance of Aurat March, we have seen how, although the women are speaking from their own contexts, from the indigenous spaces, from the grassroots experiences about themselves, but there are still allegations about them not talking about the woman or the subalterns or the people who are at the margins. So there will always be the questions regarding accessibility, authenticity, and these are the complexities that will always be there regarding discourses about activism or women activism or feminist struggles.
Thank you.
I think,
okay, I think Maria's next.
yeah, there was another thing that Samira said here, and she said that resistance within, which is framed within the Islamic discourses, how is that liberating? I think that is very liberating. When we look at the Islamic feminism, the concerns regarding women leadership, for instance, or women representation in the mosques, Islamic feminists see this as the first stance, as a first step towards inclusion and the first step towards equality, that women should be given an equal space within the mosques, which are the communal spaces of contact where women can assert themselves and have an equal footing. So constructing this discourse of equality, of women equality within the Islamic discourses is also a very positive step ahead in our countries, in Pakistan especially, or any other Arab or Muslim country.
Thank you. I think, Maria, you're next.
Yes, thank you so much, Naila, for an amazing talk. So I just wanted to kind of scale back to when you were talking about the Aurat March, because I know that this charge of, elite capture, it's something that Aurat March also constantly addresses by showing how they're collaborating with domestic workers unions and with, projects that they're doing in other provinces. But it's also kind of something that is very exclusively used about feminists, because somehow, our entire political setup is also largely elite capture, but that's not an argument that's ever brought up there. So I kind of wanted to bring up a lot of the themes that you've talked about with digital activism, with nationalism. I think our former Prime Minister Imran Khan is a great linchpin for these, because he kind of mobilized so many of these discourses. And also, especially with regards to digital activism, we've sort of seen how Twitter hashtags were run specifically against women in the media who were writing or speaking critically about him. His political opponents, Maryam Nawaz being, one who's constantly had hashtags floated about her. So I kind of wanted to bridge this, or see if you could bridge it, because Imran Khan also has blamed his ouster on, quote unquote, a foreign conspiracy, and the fact that the United States is behind his being, voted out of office. So I kind of thought that intersects so well with the way feminists and the Aurat March are constantly accused of being foreign funded and Western funded and belonging to NGOs, even though they constantly have to prove that they're independently funded. So I wanted to see if you could sort of shed some light on the way Imran Khan has framed the whole, so for example, with Afghanistan, he also cited they have broken the shackles of slavery. And so this idea of any progressive movements for human rights are almost always going to be labeled foreign, Western, foreign funded, coming from there. So how would you kind of address that in this context? Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria. This is a very, very interesting thing that you've pointed towards. Yes, I feel like this phrase, foreign intervention, foreign agenda, or foreign agent, these phrases have been thrown around whenever our nation feels that women are resisting, or anyone at all is resisting against the stereotypical oppressive structures. This kind of phrasing has not only been used by Imran Khan or against Aurat March, or this has been constantly used about all women who have somehow challenged patriarchy. For instance, Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, when she got the Oscar, then Malala Yousafzai, and that has constantly been used regarding her as well, that she's a foreign agent. And very, very ironic is, I think Gary remembers that when I asked the question from Malala Yousafzai, her father called me at the back of the whole stage, and he said me that, are you a foreign agent, because you are asking Malala, what about those Pakistanis who are not with you? So this phrase has constantly been thrown around different kinds of women who try to, talk about different frameworks, or who try to question authenticity of anything at all. And it has been exploited by men as well. Imran Khan is such an interesting case study regarding that now that he has been ousted, there is this discourse, okay, these are foreign powers that are behind this. He even took out a letter and said, see, I have the letter in my hand that US is behind my the conspiracy regarding me. And nobody has seen the letter. Nobody knows what's written in here, but it's just a tool and a ploy used to put a shade on, okay, it's, somebody is behind all this and somebody is doing it against me because I'm a big shot. So it's very unfortunate, and I feel like there are some colonial structures or the colonial discourses regarding the foreign intervention here. And just like when Spivak talks about subaltern, she talks about how, we know that when the British powers tried to outlaw the laws regarding widow burning or the genital mutilation, there was a pushback, and these were, although they were good for the women there, but they were seen as anti-national because they were seen as as not being good for their culture. In the similar manner, foreign agent or being a foreign intervention has always been used to throw any discourse regarding women or regarding anything at all. It's very unfortunate we fall into this play, we fall into this kind of discourse, but this is probably the only way people disregard any kind of authentic claim regarding authenticity, by calling in this everything as foreign conspiracy, be it Imran Khan or the feminist agendas. I really don't know what's the way out of it. But whenever you throw in a phrase like foreign power is involved, people suddenly start, this is a way to weigh them for you. This is one of the effective phrases to be used. And I think there's a lot of colonial agenda or colonial discourses regarding, being slaves of colonial powers still used here, we being the post-colonial and neo-colonial states. This is a very effective term to be used.
Exactly. Thank you, Maria, for your question. Ahipsa Chakraborty, you're next, and then Sumera Pardeen.
Thank you. Thanks, Naila, for the very enlightening talk. I had two quick questions based on your presentation. One is more out of curiosity. I was wondering if you found any other theoretical frameworks apart from Spivak's idea of the subaltern, to be useful to analyze the category of the woman from the global south, especially because your talk sort of points in the direction of transnational feminism, transnational, potentials for collaboration in terms of like feminist politics and feminist futures. So that was one. And the other is, do you think that with this new age of more like digitally active, globally expansive forms of feminist activism, there has been an impact on cultural representations of women, let's say in pop culture in countries like Pakistan, especially because because you're interested in looking at technology. I'm thinking like outside of the realm of, let's say, Twitter or other kinds of online activism is, our TV shows or, films like responding to this type of like a development in feminist politics. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I would rather address to the second part of your question first. I think you are asking how the digital activism, other than very clearly the platforms that are addressing activism, other than that, how other cultural representations are changing the perceptions of women. For instance, the shows. Just recently, like just yesterday in my class, I'm teaching Middle Eastern women here, we had a discussion regarding how Muslim women sing to change the stereotypes. And there were so many examples regarding, okay, how is singing changing the perceptions and how singing has become one of the ways to resist as well. And we had so many examples from Afghanistan and Pakistan and other Middle Eastern countries, from Iran and Iraq, women who are playing instruments, women who are part of orchestra, women who are, there was one of the Kurdish women who sang a song, and she like removes her niqab and then you can see her legs, and this was one of her ways to resist against the powers who are asking her to veil. So veiling and unveiling has been one of the ploys of policy making in the Muslim countries, and women are challenging all these through the media. And since such things cannot be played on the national televisions, women are using YouTube or social media, other social media such as Instagram or Twitter to kind of spread around their songs or their representations where they challenge such kind of modes of resistance. So yeah, this is very interesting way of resistance for women from South Asia as well. They're singing, for instance, Misha Shafi's song Hot Mango Chutney Sauce. I mean, this is a symbol for so much. It's such a rich song. She apparently had it made in Toronto, but it has like Pakistani truck art in it and very tacky and flashy clothes, and she's putting on bindi and every kind of South Asian jewelry, and she's making a statement regarding her own empowerment and feminist agency as well. So I feel like social media has become a very important place where women are saying a lot about their own cultures and about their own resistance. And since Misha Shafi is seen as the first person, a prominent person who used this hashtag of Me Too in Pakistan, people have a very keen eye about her, that what she's doing, what she's saying, how is she saying. The second part of your question was how much Spivak's frameworking of subaltern studies is still relevant. Am I right?
Yeah, in a way, but also I was wondering, like, did you find any other theoretical frameworks apart from the subaltern, the category of the subaltern, that is a little bit dated but is still relevant? We all know that, but especially in terms of like developments from other areas of the global South. I'm thinking like if you were able to find any other theoretical frameworks useful to analyze the category of the woman in this context.
I talked about how Radhika Gajala has borrowed this phrase from Spivak, and she has used that as and she has made it her own by talking about the digital subalterns. So I feel Gajala is very important when she writes about the subaltern in the digital spaces, where, let me take it out. So Gajala talks about the not only the gender digital divide, she also talks about these gendered subalterns on the digital spaces. And I feel like the way she has used this term and made it her own, and talks about subaltern in terms of digital spaces, the digital spaces that are seen as very, as places of equity where everyone has a certain kind of representation. She says that no, even digitalization has not been able to empower subalterns who do not have voices. And she connects it with the questions of, for instance, hypervisibility and invisibility. This also reminds me of another framework which is used by the concept of hypermasculinity, which can be kind of intersected with this point of view regarding hypervisibility. Certain images are hypervisible regarding Muslim women, for instance, the hypervisibility of the women who are trying to resist in these spaces, but also the invisibility of those who are okay with the frameworks for the patriarchal structures within which they are living. For instance, Sabah Mahmood talked about women who were perfectly fine with their wailing and everything, because they said they were doing it not for the patriarchy, but for their own piety, for their own self gratification, or for the higher power that was above there. So the way this has been played about by Radhika Gajala is very interesting, I feel, when we talk about digital activism in South Asia, especially.
Thank you. Sumera Parveen is next, and then we'll turn to someone in the chat box, Rubina Shaikh.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Thanks for giving me a chance to speak out here on this platform where I really appreciate Naila for giving such beautiful and useful information. So my question is pertinent to situation of Afghanistan, because I think in Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka and India, things are relatively better. But in Afghanistan, the situation is very unfavorable, as we can all see that, where there is no concept, there is little economic, or you can say technological advancement, or how the women, we also see that the women are living in that part of South Asia could not voice out for even their basic rights. They cannot they are not very much free to get education even, and so my particular question is regarding the situation that how the other movements or NGOs of world, particularly South Asian feminist movements, could highlight their issues, or to some extent could assist them in getting even their basic rights of education, health, or profession, because we could easily see that there is a little concept of digital activism and all these things which we are talking here. So my question is this, related to particularly the situation of Afghanistan and the women there. Thanks.
Thank you, Sumera. This is very interesting point here, and this reminds me of like how we always talk about this authenticity, and talking about authenticity, we also talk about how women cannot be represented by others and they have to voice themselves. So you said that how can Afghani women be highlighted? I feel again that would be very unfair for them if somebody else is talking about them. And when we talk about Afghanis, Laura Bush was the first person, first white feminist who talked about them, about these women in Afghanistan. And there was a lot of backlash about her. And there were a lot of third world feminists who said that Laura Bush has no right to talk about these women, because these women have to speak from their own positions of from their own positions of enunciation, and they have to talk about themselves instead of white women talking about them or talking about their concerns. where it is important that we should talk about their or what they are undergoing. We cannot be complicit to the power structures who are kind of submerging their voices. It is very important to give them the voices and let them speak. So not to speak about them, but to speak with them would be the very, very important point to notice here. There's a lot of voices about Afghanis these days. There's a lot of media talking about it, the white media, supposedly the Western Eurocentric media talking about it. But then in the dynamic of this hierarchical power or hierarchy, where do the Afghani women themselves are? This also reminds me of Malala Yousafzai. She was one of the people I talked about in my dissertation as well. And Malala Yousafzai is the youngest parliamentarian in Afghanistan. She has been removed now, but she was one of the very vocal people who said that we do not want foreign intervention. We do not want to be saved. We do not want white saviors to come and save us. Let us do things for ourselves. And she was against the Western powers who are again and again imposing their power on them, supposedly being very concerned regarding saving the woman. And again, what Spivak said, white man trying to save brown woman from brown men. I think that we need to remember that the only voices that matter are the voices of these Afghani women themselves. So talk to them, maybe talk with them, but not for or about them is what would matter here.
Thank you.
Naila.
Thank you. Naila, Rubina has a similar question. I think it's in response to your earlier point about how foreign agents and that phrase is used to discredit a feminist movement. And Rubina asks, most of the NGOs in the third world are funded by Western imperialist powers. They have their own political agendas, which they push through these organizations. Would you say that the work of these NGOs is counterproductive when it comes to empowering women in these countries?
I think I've answered this before as well. Thank you, Rubina, for your question. It is, yes, counterproductive, I would say that. Where the major media outlets are trying their best to raise the concerns regarding issues ongoing in our countries or in the third world regarding women, but they're also kind of usurping or hijacking these discourses, because once the foreign power starts talking on behalf of the women from these countries, the issues take another turn and becomes more of an issue of foreign intervention than the issue regarding women fighting for themselves. And we all need to be wary of that, I feel.
Very good, thank you. The next, there's last two questions, Mamuna Amin and then Farah Siddiqui.
I've been listening to the whole discussion quite attentively, and I just want to wipe out that delusion which is found in majority of people all around the world. The restrictions, the cruelties, the exploitations of women, sometimes wrongly attributed with Islam. See, I'm not advocating it, but the thing is, I have gone through it meticulously. And what status Islam has according to women should be above controversy or any sort of disputations. See, sometimes we talk about the veiling, why should a woman veil or not? The secret things, the precious things need to be hidden from peeping toms. One thing, and the women empowerment, which is the focal point of Islam, can't be found in any other religions. With due apologies, let me say that. So whenever there is exploitation in the Muslim countries or the post-colonial countries, it should not at all be related to Islam. People who are doing it on the name of Islam, they are just using a mask, something to promote Islamic phobia. Thank you. That's my point.
Thank you. Yes, you are perfectly, you're right about it. Exactly, this is what is happening here. And I feel like Islamic feminism is doing exactly this. Women talking through the frameworks of Islam and invoking the visions that the early Islamic women or Muslim women have seen. For instance, there are a lot of images that are invoked of Prophet's wife, Khadija, and how she was an entrepreneur and she had her own business and she was the one who proposed Muhammad as well. I feel going back to these traditions is for a certain reason, and the reason is that we need to remember that Islam is all about woman empowerment and not vice versa. So yes, you're right. I would totally agree with you.
Okay, thank you. Farah, why don't you?
Yeah, so thank you for this very interesting and comprehensive talk about feminism. So my question is about the separate sphere theory, right? You were talking about how women can be liberated, if they get into the public sphere more, right? If their representation in public sphere increases. But what about the private sphere? Sometimes the exploitation takes place because they don't have voice in their private space, right? So if we approach it from a point of affective labor and how women perform, most of the labor of emotions and caring, how can we take that into account? Just the public sphere, just the private sphere instead of public sphere. And this is kind of a selfish question because my dissertation is about affect and empathy in postmodern literature and also postcolonial literature. So I talk about mostly, how women are, how the emotions are also socially constructed in many ways, social norms like confine caring and empathy, kind of to women, and men are more like independent and autonomous. And so I was just trying to look at it from a different lens, like from the point of view of affect theory. The affect theorists talk about a lot about affective labor and how women perform affective labor, and how can we just tie it more to post-colonial literature, works by like post-colonial authors and stuff.
Mm-hmm. So this reminds me of the phrase, private is public,
right?
Like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this also reminds me how personal is also political.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah.
So I feel like the bifurcation between the personal and political would further, complicate this instead of solving these issues. Whatever women are suffering in their personal lives as political as well, and you can see in all the slogans that I also one of my slides also addressed that apna khana khud garam karo.
I know, I remember that.
Paratha roles, not gender roles,
right?
And mera jism meri marzi, which means my body is my it's my property, not yours. So these have all these slogans have actually come from a very personal experience, and they then were taken as a political stance as well, because personal is political for all these women. Whatever is happening in these households, the kind of harassment that women undergo, the emotions, the emotional play of them being responsible of their homes and their children and keeping within that framework, trying to serve everyone, this has become somewhat very tiring for these women. And that is exactly why these political slogans are originating from that very private and personal experience. So I feel these are one and the same, how personal is actually political, how private is actually public as well.
Right.
So emotion is actually, yes, it's a personal emotion at one level, but then when you start addressing that personal emotion as a public problem as well, only then you are able to politicize it and talk about it and maybe try to change that dynamic as well.
Right. Yeah, change the emotional norms, when caring becomes, that men also, and it is changing. It's not they also are supposed to care and, be more emotional. Just changing the norms about emotions will help as well.
Right. And addressing these issues, in public, saying that this is an issue.
Right. That's true.
It.
Yeah. Thank you.
Wonderful. I mean, that's a profound way to end, because this carries on to our next year's season, which is social reproduction theory and the unpaid care work that women do globally. And it will have a strong international focus for next year's theme. So please tune in for that. But Naila, what a way to end this academic year. An outstanding, outstanding talk, and the conversation was phenomenal, and I'm so glad we have a recording of it. We will share it on our YouTube channel, and in gratitude to you, Naila, and to all of you for being here and participating. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was very enriching, all the discussion and the things that happened after. Thank you so much for attending. I'm very pleased to be with all of you today.
You feel free to stay and mingle afterwards with Naila, and she's here. And Naila, I just have been taking copious notes the whole time, and I just love the way you brought Spivak back into the 21st century.
Thank you, Carrie. I'm so glad to be here.
You know, I have a question too, Naila, as people are signing off. I've been having this question with colleagues. Third world, I was told not to use anymore, to use majority world or minority world or lower income, middle income country, LMI. Are you familiar with all these debates, and where do you stand in all that?
It's a very important consideration to make. Should third world be said third, because third connotes some kind of derogatory emotion with it as well. And I believe whatever you name it, what we need to understand is that the concerns are certainly different when it comes to different geographical spaces, and women are struggling for diverse issues, and we need to understand whatever we name it, whether we name it global north, global south, or tricontinental, or third world, or post-colonial, neo-colonial. The need to understand is that women are undergoing diverse situations, they're undergoing diverse challenges, and they are trying to address them in diverse manners. And women do not need saviors. This is what is most important to be understood, especially, even in this era, lots of wars are happening only because of the savior complex. We'll go and save them from this. We'll go and save them from that. And instead of saving, there's further havoc, there's wars, there's weaponization. So this discourse of being a savior, this hyper masculinity where you want to save someone because they're infantile and they're considered as not able to fight on their own behalf. This has certainly done a lot of damage to the feminist causes as well. And to mitigate that damage, I think we need to understand that women need to save themselves. And they need to speak. They need to be given more platforms where they can, appear to regard their own issues and own them, and then empower themselves. So where these terms are important, I feel like more important is to know that the struggles are diverse as well.
Exactly. That's well said. Well said. Well, Naila, you're going to be around this summer so we can go for coffee?
Yes, please. I would love that.
That would be wonderful. All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We're going to sign off.